article is, and I will put a second article up on the YouTube video when I put it up. We're looking at an idea of how much it's going to cost to live comfortably. Now, those sort of estimates have come up and been published on and off over time, and different groups will publish them at various times as well. So this latest one is the Association of Super Funds of Australia. They may have done statements in the past. Okay, this one's only been published yesterday. So if you're going to, it's like, well, if you want to live and comfortably and achieve certain things, well, how much will you need? 172,000 in super is the average balance for nearly 18 million super holders over the age of 15. Okay, so that's 15 all the way through. So it's obviously being dragged down by the young workers who won't have had enough time to put much into their super. But for those in these retirement brackets, 65 to 69, you're looking at 400 plus in super, which isn't too bad. But is that enough to live off? Great that more Australians are reaching retirement with meaningful super, so substantive, but is it enough to live off? As things get more expensive, we've talked about forever renters, that if you're not already owning outright or nearly owning outright by this age, you may never get to that point for secure housing, all that sort of stuff. Are you looking at to progress onto a pension? What does your superannuation look like? How is that going to pay out? All sorts of bits and pieces. It's self-managed, yada, 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 yada. Okay, so how much do you need to live in retirement? And so these sort of figures look fairly similar to what I've seen before, what they've put up before. So annually, you're looking at, it's a picture, not a thing. Comfortable lifestyle, 75,000, call it that. For a couple, as a homeowner, 50,000 on a modest. I don't know what the difference between the two is. I'm sure they'll tell us what that is. Whereas a single is 54 for comfortable, 35 for modest. But if you're renting, a modest lifestyle for a couple, 67,000, and close to 50,000 for singly. So what's that? $20,000 difference in annual expenditure for comfortable or modest for a singly. But if you're a singly that's renting, you're effectively that $20,000, $15,000 of that's just been eaten up by rent. So it's an increase of 3.5% and 3.6% based on the estimates they had last year, connected to the rising cost of living. Yet I'm sure that when the CPI index comes out, they're not going to give us a 3.5% increase in pensions. Retirees over 85 would need less money, probably because they're less active. A typical single homeowner will need about 300,000 in superannuation for a comfortable retirement. Couples need a combined 430, which we come back up here to what they stated, which was for those 65 to 69, the average balance is around 420. Okay, so if they're homeowners, well, there you go. You're going to be looking at being able to have a comfortable lifestyle. Now, how do they define a comfortable lifestyle? So modest lifestyle difference is less on health insurance, cars, take fewer holidays. And it does, okay, so spending habits, pre-retirement to post-retirement. People spend less in retirement, and increasingly so as retirement goes on. Yeah, you live longer, spend less. You also get discounts on council rates, electricity, medicines, and other benefits, which are an implicit income of thousands of dollars a year. Yep, fair enough. That's a fair statement. So where things listen the most, more money going on daily essentials. So electricity prices have got, yeah, that was insane, the last set of electricity bills. So yeah, the increase is close to 25%. of electricity. Cost of eating out, 1.3%. Okay, so that's fairly flat. 9.3% for media services. So you're talking about streaming services. A lot of them are now, well, not consolidating. They're putting ads in and still raising prices. So prices have risen the fastest in things like food, energy, and health. Yes. So people might cut back on gifts, travel, and social occasions. Yeah, fair enough. Which is funny because when I looked at, I actually looked at the CPI basket and figures a couple of years back, because something I was looking at got a CPI index of like, in the very same breath as people saying, oh yeah, inflation is 2 to 3% or something like that. The CPI indexed increase on something was like 1.9 or 1.5%. I'm like, well, how do you get away with stating that inflation is blah, but your CPI increase is not nearly the same? Or how do you justify that it's only a 2% increase when your health insurance and your utilities have all shot up by 20%? And then I went and actually had a look at the basket that they use when trying to determine this sort of stuff. And it turns out that there were decreases in international travel. And this is post-COVID, so there were deep discounts to encourage people to start traveling again. But for whatever reason, it was part of it. And I was like, well, if people are having so much of their disposable income no longer disposable because it's being eaten up by rising cost of living, who has the available funds to go on international travel? Like if groceries, and groceries were fairly flat in this particular basket, but if you're paying 20% extra across the board for electricity, gas, water, whatever, where's the available funding? Rate of wages didn't go up by 20%. So yeah, I was dubious about the appropriateness of that CPI basket, but well, presumably people are traveling. It's like, well, if you can't afford, if you're struggling on daily cost of living, what's the relevance of including international travel costs in your CPI basket? Which I think led to an unrealistic expectation or reality, which is people looking at the increasing costs compared to wages that might be linked to CPI increases. They're never going to match up, because I certainly felt at the time that the whole argument for how they constructed it was weak. But anyway,